NetSparker, the developers of a comprehensive automated web security platform that includes web vulnerability scanning, assessment, and management. NetSparker's desktop and cloud-based security solutions employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities and provides a proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at securityweekly.com/NetSparker. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM. Well, welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. We are an official media partner for the virtual Black Hat 2020 event. To register and save $200, visit securityweekly.com/summercamp2020. Click the register button, use the discount code 20SecWeekBH. Alongside Virtual Black Hat, we are running our conference micro interviews just like we did the past couple of years, except you guessed it, it'll be virtual this year in an event called Security Weekly Virtual Hacker Summer Camp, August 3rd through the 6th. If you would like to sponsor this event, come on and tell the world about your product, why it's better than everyone else's. Pricing and availability are on the same page. Reserve your slot now. Welcoming back Sumedh Thakar, the Chief Product Officer at Qualys. He's overseeing worldwide engineering, development, and product management for the Qualys SaaS solution platform and integrating all types of security compliance and other such functionality into the Qualys platform. securityweekly.com/Qualys is where you can learn more about especially the newly announced VMDR and other capabilities, which Sumedh will talk about in this segment. Sumedh, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. Always pleasure being on your show.
Yes, nice to have you here with us, Sumedh. I want to start and talk about patching because I know we've talked about it in a couple of previous shows, and it really is an interesting point that needs to be underscored, right? Having worked in vulnerability management, and before that, having been a pen tester, and before that, tried to implement vulnerability management at multiple different companies, I think that the thing that always sticks out in your mind is, if I can find those vulnerabilities, why can't I just patch them? And how has that been going?
Yeah, it's been going really well. And especially with this remote working and endpoints being completely remote, I think that's taken on a whole different new urgency to it because, people were kind of like, we haven't patched as much, but the devices within my firewall, I should be able to manage it, right? Like that's suddenly gone. Like your device that's on your home network is with other IoT devices, coffee machines that could be compromised or whatever it is. You have no control. You have no idea about what's going on. And I think that sort of put people in this thing of like, we need to get things done quickly and we need to get those patched quickly. But the challenge is that the enterprise solutions that are behind your VPN are not helping. And so as somebody put out a meme that COVID's actually driving the digital transformation of the organization these days because that's pushing security professionals to get approval from management to move towards more nimble, scalable SaaS solutions. And so that's been something that has drawn a lot of interest for people, looking at Qualys. And then from a timing perspective, we had that 60-day free endpoint security service. And as we launched that, pretty soon after that, we launched VMDR, right, which we talked last time a little bit. But exactly to your point, it's why we see that the IT folks really hate the security people giving them that big CVE list. Because it's like, well, okay, what do I do with it, right? They go and they try to figure something out. They patch what they think is the right patch. A week later comes back, it still shows in their list that, oh no, you didn't patch. And that's like that's been the real challenge. So with VMDR, we really focused on saying, hey, we need to figure out how to get the patching done much more quickly, much more effectively, and much more simply, and eliminate all that friction that happens between the vulnerability team and the prioritization team and the patching team. And that's been going really well. We have quite a few customers. We recently a customer with the global workforce, they just turned on 250,000 endpoints for Qualys patching within 2 weeks of POC. So it just shows you the kind of momentum that's building to be able to do the patching, because it's like you can run reports all day long, but what do you do with it?
Yeah, it's interesting how it impacts the priority too. If you think about what's exposed to the internet, essentially now all your folks working from home are exposed to the internet all the time, right? They're not taking, even if it's a laptop or a desktop sits there statically most of the time, and a laptop would have some protection and get patched when it's connected to the corporate network. But now, like, basically everything is exposed to the internet, and that flips your priority. And if your priority is to patch 250,000 in your example, Sumedh, endpoints, how do you do that effectively?
And that's, we looked at that, right? This SMB Ghost patch that came out, I think a month or so ago, was like 350 megabytes for one machine. You got 1,000 machines, that's 350 gigs, okay, in your VPN. That was never meant to do that. And that's really what's making everybody think very differently on how you want to approach that. And what you want to prioritize, because my son has a desktop on the same network, and he downloads every day some new game, some new Fortnite, that comes with a lot of freebies, right? And it's scary when I look at the stuff that's on my home network that's been installed and downloaded.
One of my sons is right into Farming Simulator. Right, and then there's add-ons, and
exactly.
The stuff I was blocking
the free
those
add-ons, and the worst ones are where they say install this and it'll help you skip the levels quicker.
The cheat software. I'm like, no, don't do that. And then when you talk about IoT, right? My new smoker is Wi-Fi enabled, right? Like everything has Wi-Fi. My thermometer that's separate from the smoker, right? It's a Inkbird or something, right? It's Wi-Fi. It's on my network. Talks to an app on my phone. Because how else do you monitor the temperature of the meat in your smoker other than with a Wi-Fi enabled thermometer?
I installed a Windows update today, and Windows changed the name of a service to searchapp.exe, which set off a bunch of alarms in my system, because that used to be a piece of malware that belonged to, it wasn't malware, but it was like a Trojan in a Nikon file. And I was like, gee, did nobody search this?
Right.
Come on.
That's awesome. They named the new file with the same as well.
Yeah, and it was like, and I was like, did I just get infected? I thought this was a patch, and then it was like, boom. It was like, oh no, they just named it the same thing as an old, file that you shouldn't have. And two of my other, my NVIDIA drivers wouldn't run because of that piece of software, and because they were detecting that and said it was some problem.
Interesting.
Paul, think about how are you going to patch your smoker?
Yeah, exactly. Through my phone, which is
yes,
Android.
Exactly. So now you have to have that phone connected, and that's just really the problem that we're facing right now, right? And also the other thing is it's a little bit easier on the home devices and IoT devices. You can patch anytime, but when it comes to some of the critical services, it's like, should I patch it? Is it going to bring something down? That adds some more complexity to that, and so the prioritization aspect is very important. And we hit some of that in the past, but we see all the time that when you look at prioritization just by severity of the vulnerability, it's not giving you a clear picture, because you may have other mitigating controls in place that really block that vulnerability from being exploited. So
Sumedh, sorry, my question is, where do those 250,000 remote workers, where do they get their patches? Is the download coming from Qualys? Is it coming from Microsoft? Is it coming from the corporate VPN? Or do I get to pick, or does it depend on the deployment?
That's a great question, because if you look at the profile of this company, they're a global services company, and they have developers and QA people who are stuck in apartments all over the world, on little bandwidths, where many of them are sharing 1 megabyte DSL and things like that. And so it's not VPN or any of that, right? What we do is we work directly with the patch providers from their own CDNs, right? Microsoft, Adobe, So we do a lot of work around making sure that we get the information about those patches, where to download those from, which right patch needs to be downloaded, and then make sure that the hashes, etc., are consistent so that we can directly download from their content, and instead of going through some choke point, which causes many other additional issues that you otherwise have to deal with.
And it's also interesting, while the operating system, obviously, you could remove it and replace it with something else, right? But when we start getting into applications, there's this philosophical debate, like, do I allow my users to run this software or not? And do I just remove it? So in the patching process, Sumedh, can I say, I don't want to patch that application? Like, you know what? I just want to remove it because it's too risky. Is that a capability in the platform today?
It is. So part of it is there, and part of it is coming in a couple of months, right? So what we do today is we do a very in-depth asset inventory. So you hit the nail on the head, because you many times, and we realized this ourselves we were spending a lot of time patching Firefox on our systems. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, like, who's using Firefox? Like, how can we be patching so many Firefox? Nobody's using Firefox that I know. And then because our agent is continuously tracking not just what's installed, but also the usage. So we track how many times and when was the last time that every installed software was actually used, right? So with that, we were able to quickly go and see that 90% of our Firefox installations were not used even once in 6 months. And we traced it back to a laptop image that was done like 2 years ago, where somebody thought it was a good idea to include Firefox. And now everybody gets it, and then every couple of weeks it downloads and it updates and it restarts, and it's like, why are we doing this? So we were able to basically in our own dev builds right now, we were able to select that and just say, go to all these 50,000 machines and uninstall Firefox, right? Nobody's using it, right? You have this app whitelist, app blacklist anyway, where people try to do this by blocking apps and things like that. And so here's just, you take it to a different level where you even reduce the potential of your policy not being in place if you just remove that software. So yes, that is something. Overall, what we have done, and I think you will see that on the 29th of July when we talk about our EDR launch of our product using the same agent technology, that we are putting a lot of work into bringing response to the endpoint. And to exactly what you pointed out, response is not just about killing a process and about quarantine a file. It also is a very broader response, which also includes things like uninstalling software or fixing configurations. And the agent technology that we have really allows us to be able to do that broader response. And we're quite excited about that.
And so it'll keep Firefox off those systems. If I, as a user, install Firefox, will it then just remove it?
You can do that, right? So you can do, for example, you could say that based on the type of system it is, like automatically patch the software. Like Adobe patch comes out, like, why do you need anybody to manually go in and run a patch job? Adobe patch comes out, just patch all my Adobe systems that are laptops.
Right. And they just had a big patch update as well.
Right, exactly, right. Yeah. And so that's the same concept that we apply for the software uninstall, etc. Is that these are my blacklisted software. Anybody who installs it, just go and uninstall it, right? Even if they try to do it through a USB and not download it directly,
right,
we could do that which is based on policy, absolutely.
Excellent. Sorry, Lee.
Go ahead. I was going to say, how tightly are you coupled to the endpoint? Are you sitting in the kernel? Are you sitting externally?
So depending on the functionality that they want to enable, so we do sit in user land wherever. We need local admin on the Windows, and on the Linux boxes, we try to sit in user land as much as possible to do many things that we do, just to make it easier. But then when we get into the more complex things like eventing for EDR and file integrity monitoring, so there we hook ourselves into the kernel so that we can get better visibility. So we try to, like, if you want to do patching and stuff like that, we don't need to get into the kernel. We don't enable that, just to keep it a little bit safer for our users.
Because I was going to ask, how big a deal are kernel updates then? Is that, you've got it nailed so we can update those easily, or are we going to have to go slow?
Well, that's the challenge with when anytime that you have these kernel things. Right now, what we do, of course, is that the reason why the agent from Qualys is so lightweight and it's different is because the agent is, everybody says they have this really smart agent, right? We talk about the Qualys as a dumb agent, and I don't mean that. My development teams are not happy hearing that, but
right. Your sales teams either probably aren't happy hearing that, right?
Yeah. I think now I have a few developers less after listening to this. But the idea there is that, look, we just collect information and we send it to the platform, right? So unlike many other agents, and why you've had these big bloated agents, is that they try to do everything because they don't have a cloud-based backend. So in our model, we just hook with the very common APIs that are provided with kernel hooking, etc., and callbacks, so that really those don't change between the updates. And so we're just getting basic information. We send it to the platform. The platform does what it needs to do, and then it sends back saying, okay, this is okay, this is not okay, you need to kill this. So we've really worked hard to keep it very simple.
I think he's saying that he stays away from ntdll.dll. You could say that in one sentence.
I do say that. Anything NT actually would stay away from it.
Yeah, just a filter, right? NT star. That's like all the rest.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and so,
and yes, I've wrestled with that before. So.
And Sumedh, it's also a configuration thing. Like on the Windows side, you can monitor for PowerShell, right? Because it's also doing configuration, and Windows components largely could be just managed as configuration, correct?
Yeah, I mean, we did the 60-day free remote endpoint service, which basically said, look, we'll do asset inventory, vulnerability management, configuration monitoring, and patching, right? That was the need of the hour. Then last month, we enhanced that by adding malware detection capabilities to the same agent. And also with the updates that we are coming up with, today we already monitor the configs, and we'll also be able to fix the configurations with our EDR solution that is coming out.
Gotcha.
Because at the end of the day, the vulnerability, actually the term vulnerability is a very broad term, right? Like a lot of times we take it only as a software patch that needs to be deployed. But you could have a perfectly patched machine with all the software that's patched, but then you have a admin password that's ABC123, or you have the entire C drive is shared with anonymous access.
Right. Or you have people like Joff and Tyler that have their bag of tricks that they won't talk about publicly, that it could be fully patched and they're still getting in, right?
Exactly, right. And so that's why we're with VMDR, we bring not just patch management, but also configuration monitoring together with the patching capability and fixing the config. So the way we're kind of broadening this is that you always looked at these as different tools, right? Asset inventory is different, vulnerability is different, and configuration is different, and EDR is different. But at the end of the day, it's the same host. And to me, VMDR, which is managing your vulnerabilities and configurations on all of that, is your prevention, right? Like that's you're trying to prevent attacks from happening to the extent that you can. And then you go into your detection, which is the EDR, and then you use the same agent, but you look at different data points. And a lot of times what happens is that, it's the same object that's changed, right? A file could have changed, and that could mean we need to look at it from a new vulnerability perspective, or maybe it's related to configuration passing or failing. Maybe it's a file integrity issue. From a compliance perspective, maybe it's a malware issue. It's all the same file and the same change, but you have 4 agents to do that on your endpoint. Instead of that, what we've done is we only have 1 agent. We collect the data once, send it to the platform once, and then we run the 4 engines back on our platform side, right? So that way we can really give them multiple capabilities while looking at all the changes that are happening on the system and providing additional wider sort of ability to take detection and response to the next level.
And Sumedh, you develop the malware detection capabilities in-house. Can you kind of speak to that? Because there's like a million endpoint vendors out there and a million different types of malware and a million different attack techniques and defensive techniques, but you've developed your own. Like what's its sweet spot?
Yeah, I started thinking about that as malware detection is a fairly well-defined way that you do it, right? You need good threat intelligence. And honestly, you need to democratize threat intelligence because there's no one vendor that can say, I have the best threat intelligence about what is going on, right? So as we developed this platform, as we did more of that, and we started realizing, there's 3 vulnerability management vendors and there's like 40 EDR vendors, right? So there's something that makes it much more well-defined in terms of what you need to do, which is really ability to collect a large amount of data and then look for these patterns, whether it's through machine learning or whether it is through your own intelligence or a third-party intelligence. So we figured that one thing we could really do quickly was to give our customers the visibility on all these remote endpoints that are sitting all over the world, a quick way to say, not only just to patch them, but to say, well, which ones of them look like they're compromised. And to do that, we needed to collect a lot. We were collecting a lot of the data. We just needed to collect it in a different way, whether it was file or registry or whatever it is, and work on a lot of the backend stuff to provide that ability to look for IOCs, provide that ability to look for patterns and get threat intelligence from partners. So we started working. Of course, we have our own lab where we do a lot of this work and we do a lot of analysis. We get a lot of samples every day. We reverse engineer those. But then we also have worked with a few partners to bring in this threat intelligence and then apply that on the platform. So it is developed in-house. To a large extent because the scale that is needed. Today we do 6 trillion data points in Elasticsearch and we think we do like 5 billion messages in Elasticsearch on Kafka, and like 1 million writes per second on Cassandra, right? So for us, we knew we needed to get a lot of data and then correlate it, and the platform to do that was already developed and was already in progress we were doing VMDR, etc. So that just made more sense. So yes, we developed it in-house, but a lot of the work we do is also working with partners who are bringing threat intelligence, so the customers are not relying only on one vendor in the back end. They're actually getting threat intelligence from multiple vendors, and so we have improving our chances of detecting what's going on in the environment.
So it's interesting, Sumedh, you had the platform, most of the capabilities. It doesn't seem like it was a big leap to add that malware detection, do some research in-house, integrate some other threat feeds that make that capability available to customers.
Yeah, not to sell it short, but in relative terms, right? I think, yes, it was because of the work we did early on to keep that agent a much more neutral and much more focused on data collection, and the ability with our expansion with our offices in India, where we really have now a lot of horsepower to do research and develop new capabilities. We were able to quickly take what we had put in place from an architecture perspective and then expand on that pretty quickly to come up with this solution. And of course, with the research on the malware, etc., has been going on for a few years at Qualys, as we have been looking at vulnerabilities as well. But the pieces were coming together, and with this remote work from home, that just sort of pushed us more quickly into customers asking, well, I want to know what this is. How do I know my malware? And I cannot even get new agents onto these devices if I wanted to, because for that I need SCCM, and people are not able to get to my SCCM. So
yeah, it begs the question for me, Sumedh, is that can I use what's available natively in my Microsoft Windows platform? I've already got let's say I already have the Qualys agent, right? You've added these capabilities. I don't need to add much more beyond that in terms of dealing with the agent fatigue and adding more agents to do specific things. It sounds to me like you can use natively what's in Windows plus Qualys to do your vuln scan patching, some malware detection, and you're in good shape, right?
Yeah, and you'll see more of that when we talk at our EDR live event. But you're right in terms of one of the things that we really focused on is to say, Windows does provide some pretty good capabilities, but they are not easy to manage in terms of ensuring that they're turned on, that you have to go to different consoles, etc. So one of the things that we are doing with our EDR solution absolutely is that from an endpoint EPP perspective, we are looking at how can we help customers leverage what they already have in place. Now, some of these capabilities do require that the E5 license or whatever they call it, which is very, very pricey. in general. So customers have stayed away from that in some cases, but in other cases, they've migrated to that. And so in which case it makes a lot of sense for us to try to leverage what they already have. So we're pretty good. I mean, we have a very, very close relationship with Microsoft. We have a lot of embedded capabilities in Azure that Microsoft OEMs from Qualys, and we are continuously working with them to figure out ways to integrate all our solutions much better.
Jeff.
So this is what we're calling the PCI minute.
The more you know.
Qualys has been involved in the PCI world for a long time. They're a major player, especially in the vulnerability scanning space. I'm not sure how to. What is what you're talking about? How are you positioning it to PCI customers? Because malware isn't necessarily something that PCI worries about, except for the fact that there's been a lot of memory scraping malware that's been the cause of breaches over the last couple of years. So I'm just curious as to your thoughts or your strategies on how you're positioning this to a PCI customer.
Yeah, I mean, this PCI is a very interesting mandate, right? Like, I mean, they say it's more of a best practices guide, but with a shotgun to your head. And I think they have done a great job at pushing more and more organizations, especially on the lower end, towards adopting some form of best security practices, right? So while they don't necessarily focus just on malware, but they focus a lot on the hygiene, because their goal really is to prevent quickly and detect, and so the prevention is a heavy focus. So a lot of the PCI mandate, if you look, is really surrounds around asset discovery, ability to identify which devices are actually part of your cardholder data environment, being able to classify them, being able to do that on a continuous basis, vulnerability assessment, configuration assessment, file integrity monitoring, ability to just ensure that your endpoint security software like your antivirus is actually installed and enabled on every device. It involves best practices from coding. So, you want to make sure that you're scanning your web applications, etc. So a lot of the elements that are required to achieve your PCI compliance beyond just the ASV scan, right, which we have been doing for a long time. But beyond that, there's a lot of other things that customers need to do as they mature. And we provide that single platform for them to be able to do everything from scanning their applications for SQL injection, cross-site scripting, all the way down to ensuring that they are patching their systems in time. You have your 30, 60, 90-day patching requirement from PCI. And so we have a lot of customers. So in fact, like, we don't charge for the PCI ASV certification if you're already a Qualys customer, because you're already doing so many other things to be secure that the certification is just a byproduct that, okay, you are scanning your stuff. But what's happened is that now that has expanded from just PCI to other mandates like FedRAMP, etc., which at the end of the day, in many different languages and different ways, they ask for really the same thing at the end of the day, right? Like, do you have an inventory? Are you doing vulnerability assessment? Are you prioritizing? Are you patching? And so our platform actually is ideal for that, because one of my firm beliefs is that compliance is really a validation of security, right? So if you are doing a good job with your security, the compliance is a compliance report is just a sampling to show that you're doing what you said you're doing, and so the compliance capability directly is built into the Qualys platform, because as customers are using it for security, we're able to create the evidence that they require to show compliance, and so you don't need to go and get another solution just to try to monitor your compliance.
I love that you just said compliance is really a validation of your security. I think I'm going to make a T-shirt out of that.
Send me one too. So
yeah, that's really.
I'm stealing that. That was excellent.
That's actually really prolific.
I'm going to say that one day, and people are going to be like, "Wow!" Like, yeah, I just came up with that.
We get occasionally.
I just came up with that today.
Well, and people give very profound statements on our show all the time, and sometimes we even notice it. So very good. Thank you.
That means you actually listen too when you ask the questions.
And take screenshots of it and stuff.
No, I'm listening more than you know.
So I might not have been listening. We were talking about how
I think it turned out when you said PCI.
Yes.
I heard the word
People-
PCI.
people
This was,
just-
you know, you
people-
Reel us back in, Lee. Reel us back in.
So I was saying you have a whole lot of platforms you already were supporting with your products, and you said it wasn't a huge uplift to add the EDR to it. So are you looking at providing capabilities not just in our traditional desktop endpoint, but on the IoT or other platforms you support, or am I being too broad?
No, actually, you're not, right? Because I mean, I don't want to throw out terms because people are still interpreting them newly. But there's this talk of XDR. There's a talk of that your SIM is not really doing what it's supposed to do. And then I started asking XDR, and they said, well, it's EDR plus NDR plus whatever. And I'm like, well, that just sounds like a SIM solution. So, but the idea is that, okay, at the end of the day, customers want to just run their business, okay, right? They don't aspire to have hundreds of security solutions. They just want to be secure at a meaningful cost. And so to be able to do that, they are looking to have one platform where they can see their overall visibility of the risk, whether that risk is on your endpoints, whether it's on your data center servers, whether it's for your cloud accounts, multi-cloud accounts, whether it's your containers, whether it's your SaaS applications, right? Like what is my risk to my Salesforce account, my O365 account, whether it's your handheld mobile devices or IoT devices on the network that are coming up. So beyond the endpoint, we have done a lot in terms of adding network passive scanning capability. We acquired a company that does handheld mobile device security, which includes geofencing and all of that. We recently onboarded a small company that does SaaS security compliance for O365, G Suite, etc. We recently added capabilities from a Lambda function assessment also to our platform, as we do a lot of multi-cloud assessment capabilities. And for each
Sumedh,
one of them,
don't forget layered insight.
Yes, layered insight. That's the container piece,
Near and
right?
dear to our hearts, right?
That's and that's been a great technology because containers. I mean, the thing is that when I was looking at this as was from a product perspective and hey, what's the vision? The idea was as people going from physical servers to virtual servers and virtual servers to cloud and then cloud to kind of containers and then containers to Lambda functions and Lambda functions to like SaaS. Like, are we getting to the point where people are just not like security, the traditional thing that they're doing is not relevant anymore? And so that quickly made us realize that we really want to build a platform that today we do all of that. We do very in-depth cloud assessment, container security with the layered insight acquisition, cloud, SaaS, all of that. And then as we start to bring those elements together, now we really start to see some very interesting patterns. So our EDR launch is happening end of July, but then by the end of the year, early next year, we are really looking at launching a platform for security analytics and response that brings a lot of these things together in a single solution, right? The problem with the SIM solutions is that they kind of give you like an empty shell and you have to do everything. You still have to go out, buy 50 solutions, integrate them, and have the resources to write the queries that you need to build on top of that. So we are actually looking at going far beyond EDR. And when, if you attend the EDR live, you will hear about this multi-vector approach that we are taking. And a simple example is you have an endpoint that your EDR sees is talking to IP address .25. Well, .25 is a printer, and that printer has not been patched since it was purchased in 1980. Okay, so that thing has like all kinds of vulnerabilities on it, but your EDR cannot see that because they don't have the visibility, because they're not doing active scanning on the network to find out all of these other vulnerabilities. So you can't get the full picture when you're just looking at your EDR, right? The same thing with layered insight. We'll realize pretty quickly that you could be running that container and that container image is completely clean, no vulnerabilities, very well configured, but you're running it on a host, which is a CentOS host that has not been patched and has a kernel vulnerability that can be exploited to get to your container. So that ecosystem beyond the endpoint is very important, and how it ties with each other, because that container is running a microservice, which that microservice is an API or a web application. So that web application could have a vulnerability. So you could patch all that stuff, but if you have a direct SQL injection vulnerability, your database is gone, right?
Yeah, so it's so insightful, because a lot of the attacks that I've been researching and developed recently kind of prey upon, like, that's great. Your containers, got all the latest software on it, but you wrote a custom application and it's got a bug in it that I can find. And by the way, I can leverage that bug. And while your container build might be clean, but maybe the way you deployed that container, you deployed it with these extra privileges. I start combining these two, and I'm like, local file include leads to shell, leads to container escape. But there's pieces in there you've done a really good job on. But there's other pieces that you might have missed some stuff. And if you're not taking into account all those pieces, like people like Joff and Tyler are just going to tear that stuff apart, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like you have a container shell escape, but then what, right? Like what is it on? Like what can you do with it, right? Like how much fun can you have with that, right? So that's really the bigger picture of what we are really working towards, is just that bringing a lot of that information in a single platform, so you can get this thing pretty quickly, and you can work out what your real risk is, because too many times, right, you see all of this and then you're like, yeah, but that application. And I always tell this to my team, because we are developers, right? So we are also coding our own apps, and we have to make sure they're secure, etc. But I was telling them, like, app security many times is like far more important than infrastructure security for some places where you're running apps, because it's far easier for a hacker to try to get through the UI and download a CSV of all of the data than trying to compromise 3 layers of security to get your database and read 1 byte at a time for like 5 years before you get all the data, right? Just SQL injection, get all your database dumped out, and that's like a nice. Everybody likes a nice UI.
The app and the UI is the squishy part that's pliable, that you can manipulate, right? Because it has to be exposed to the internet and the users, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it may be somewhere else. I mean,
there's multiple pieces of that in all different places, not even just somewhere else.
Yeah, I
but
mean,
like
if you have all these lambdas getting pulled in, I mean, you're just trusting that all those lambdas stay the same and they don't get compromised somehow, and you're just accessing them as you need them, and you're trusting that they're there and that they do what they say.
Sumedh, it's a great segue into my next question on developing that asset inventory. How are you able to? Are you doing passive detection? Are you hooking into the cloud provider, learning about what assets I might have? Like, talk a little bit about asset, because it definitely ties into the whole endpoint thing too. I can't secure the endpoints that I don't know I have, right?
That's I mean, this is what gave me all the gray hair, right? Of all the solutions, which was there is no one, like, there's no one way that you can get, like, you do this and you're done, right? Like, and there's vendors out there, and I logged in a little bit earlier on your show, and the other speaker was talking about, like, vendors who don't have practitioners, right? Coming up with all these claims like, oh, agentless is the best, and then somebody says, no, agent based is the best, and that's the only thing you ever need. No, I mean, the reality is, if you want a good asset inventory, a real up-to-date asset inventory, which, by the way, nobody has, you have to do every possible vector that you can use to collect the data and then correlate it, right? You got to be able to scan actively. You got to be able to have, which we do, and then you have to have a passive scanner, which we released, that sits on a tap port to see all your unmanaged devices. You got to have an agent for in-depth inventory. You need to have connectors to your cloud providers so that you can pull in S3 bucket information, etc. You need to be able to hook into your Docker API to get additional information on the specific containers that are running. Hook into your CI/CD pipeline to find out all of the images. So I just feel like it's never going to be done, because you can just keep getting better, because you need to keep adding more and more sources that pull that data in, and then you have to work on correlating, and that's where we put a lot of effort to build more and more of the global IT asset inventory, because we were just talking to a customer yesterday, and they were like, okay, we don't, we have this other vendor that provides us EDR, and we were like, okay, that's good. But they use Qualys for vulnerability assessment, and part of that, they have been getting a good asset inventory. So we went in and they did a search live while we were on the thing, and they were like, oh, I have 280 assets they found that were missing the EDR solution deployed on those, right? And so that really highlights the fact that you this is really the most important thing, is start with a good asset inventory, and there is no magic bullet for that. You have to do a lot of hard work to collect it.
It seems like you can only get to 99%, right? And I've talked to some enterprise security teams that were absolutely outstanding, right? And they were like, we still, I mean, it's not even a feeling, like, we really believe, based on the data we've analyzed, that we're still maybe 98, 99% of the way there. Like, how do we get that last 1%? And I'm like, you may never get there, to be quite honest, right? Like, it's just going to be a constant rolling cycle. You may one day find that extra 1%, and then the next day, you've got another 2% that you didn't know about, right?
Right. And, we just said earlier, we talked about Lambda functions. It's like just about as the security teams are learning how to get inventory of your cloud instances or your endpoints, you suddenly have Lambda thrown at you, which is like a whole different thing. It's like like nothing. It's not even a server. It doesn't have an operating system, and somehow you have to have an inventory of that, right? Like, so how are we going to be able to do that, right? That's, I think, one of the key things. And you're right. I mean, maybe we never get there, but like being able to get as much as you can is really important so that you can get started. Because again, we talked to a partner and they were like, we got a really great standalone container security solution, and that has all the features, this and that, and then they came back 6 months later and they said, well, we don't know where to install it, because our developers they just push out images which are black boxes to us, and they just deploy Docker on those and deploy containers. We don't even know that there are hosts running in our environment that are running Docker. So how do I get an inventory? And I cannot use my solution that I purchased, because I can only do it when I know that there is Docker installed in there, right? So that sort of big inventory of all of this stuff, and CMDBs are broken and out of date, and so there is this need to kind of have like a real source of truth that is updating your inventory, CMDB, whatever it is, with a good amount of up-to-date information, so that your security program can be actually meaningful.
Can you
go ahead, Tyler?
Kind of highlight? Yeah, just real quick, like from a high level, can you highlight kind of two things? One is some of the ways in which you're having to access these systems. Like you're talking about, cloud environments, AWS keys, maybe SSH across a disparate environment, VPN, remote workforce. How are the credentials and kind of level of permissions that Qualys has to have, how are those being kind of protected? And then second, kind of how do you foresee some of that getting better or changing? Things with like single sign-on, where that's you're starting to use SAML stuff, or protecting AWS keys so that you're not having to rotate those keys all the time in order to be compliant. How's Qualys kind of tackling those credential and privileged or extended privilege management?
That's a really good question. I mean, we look at it from both sides, because as a developer, as a team that is developing product, we also are always looking at securing information, and then our customers are also looking at access and privileged access and things like that, right? And I think in general in the industry, this has been a mess, right? Getting right credentials to be able to do the right level of scanning, etc. And so there is no one single solution for that. But what we have seen is that now we came up with this agent like about 4 years ago. We have like 40 million agents. So a lot of customers have been very quick at jumping on getting that agent out, because that really helps them have the access that is required without needing to manage and deal with credentials. But then you still have systems where you do need credentials, and traditionally people have used vaults like CyberArk, etc., which are good, but they need to be deployed as another solution, part of your infrastructure, and it needs to be managed, needs to have a backup, and that becomes a bit of a mess. So where the hope that I'm seeing, which is really hopeful, is that with the new move towards newer technology, CI/CD, and the DevOps approach of, the key management and all of that was always looked at like that's the operation team's job. That's not the development team's job, right? But now the development teams, as they package the entire application, everybody's including a vault, right? Like the vaults that are coming, the lightweight vaults that are part of Azure and AWS and all of that, like those are actually providing much better security, and the newer generation of developers coming in are much less likely to just write your password into a file on the disk and make that. Not that happens.
It's still
and,
pretty common.
right? So much less likely to have your conf file have all that information as that awareness is growing. But yeah,
I do agree, Sumedh. The awareness is growing with vaults, but like you said, it's work and another thing that you have to deploy. And I think you kind of hinted towards it, like, where does it fall? Does that fall on developers? Does that fall on ops? Does it fall on security, or some conglomeration of the three? Right.
Right. And I mean, we're seeing that developers are basically take on the whole responsibility more and more, right? As modern apps are being developed, they say, I'm just going to pack it. Like in the past, it was like they assumed that there was some database somewhere that somebody had installed and they didn't have to worry about that. Today, they lay out a CloudFormation template that has everything that you need to run their entire app all configured and ready to go, right? So I think that is definitely happening. And from a Qualys perspective, we've done this for a very, very long time. I always joke about that when I started at Qualys, like the words cloud and SaaS did not even exist. So we were telling people we're going to do this great security thing that was scalable, and we're going to store their data, which was in a data center, which was on a server that was accessible from the internet, and they would throw us out of the door right away, right? And then cloud came, and now cloud has become a fashion statement, etc. But over the years, the first thing we had to do was come up with a very, very powerful security model for our own data center and our own application, where we were using so many different layers and customers gave us pretty much a cavity search to go through, make sure that before they moved to Qualys, that they were ensuring that when we stored the data, etc., that it was actually done, because they couldn't rely on that being on-prem and within their own environment, even though it offers a false sense of security. That this is something that we've ourselves adopted a lot of vaulting and many other layers of encryption, etc., to ensure that we are securing these credentials.
It's awesome. You have a lot of great quotes, Sumedh, that came from this interview. I love your quote, and you've said it in the past too. Cloud is a fashion statement, right?
Yep. That's a great one,
right?
And people are like they are the people are saying, oh, we're because how do you differentiate? So somebody's saying I'm cloud native and I'm like this and the original cloud, and it's funny, but that's fine.
But in your analogy though, you're like basically like your data in the software is going to run, like if you're I'm the customer, my data in the software I'm using is going to reside on someone else's server, right? Yeah. In the beginning, that was a server in a Qualys data center, right? Yeah. And everyone thought you were crazy. But now it's just in an Amazon or Microsoft or Google data center. Like, what's the difference? It's someone else's server, right?
Exactly.
It is literally just a commodity now.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do. I also, and we actually spoke with CyberArk this week as well, and I love this decoupling of basically the takeaway from our interview with Brian from CyberArk, right, is, and Sumedh, I think you'll probably agree with me on this, like I want to leave the authentication piece and the key management piece to someone else. I want developers to write really awesome functional code that's secure and defensible, right? It's kind of the word I'm coming down to. I want to write defensible code. When it comes to key management, like I really want to pass that off to maybe a different team or different systems that's their job, is to do the key management, do the vaulting and the whole thing, right? I don't want my developers to, because then I end up with 16 or 1,600 different versions of how I do key management, and that's bad.
So, yeah. And we that's I totally agree, right? The separation of duty and all of that, but also that we need to be able to go more. I mean, HSM are a great idea, like where the cryptographic transaction is actually outsourced to something where you absolutely never even get the key. But I mean, the implementation of something like that is horrendous, right? So I think
it's hard.
As we grow mature, I think anything where we can do where authentication authorization is a one-way operation, and you can do one-time use tokens and things like that. I think it's a win for everybody, right? Because at the end of the day, we do all of this security, and you talk about laptops and the servers, but nobody cares about that, right? Like they're just a conduit to your data. So ultimately, your data is whatever. It's like you say that, oh, my laptop fell in the river and washed away. IT is like, yeah, we don't care about it, right? Like, we'll give you a new one. But if you say that I have malware on my laptop, they freak out, like the same laptop, because because it's like, what does that mean, right? Like, okay, if it's gone, it's gone. But like now that I have access to my critical data through that laptop, that's really the concern, right? So I think anything that as an industry we can do to safeguard the data, make it easier and safer with I mean, like, look at how multi-factor authentication has really taken up and has helped in many ways, in many cases, to reduce the amount of simple fraud that was happening, right? And tokenization for PCI in Europe heavily used, chip and pin, and it hasn't eliminated everything, but it made it something which was a protocol that anybody could just use, chip and pin or whatever it was, and that just took off, and it just made all of us a little bit more safer. And I think I totally agree that anything we can do to make the data safer, it's a win for everybody.
Agreed. So, Sumedh, just to round us out, take us through some of the upcoming announcements and what we can expect, and give folks a little preview. You and I and Mehul, which is just, it's really hilarious in a sense.
It's a small world, right?
Mehul and I have worked together in the past. We worked together recently when he was at Salt, and now he's at Qualys, right? So just kind of take us through what people can expect coming up from Qualys in terms of announcements, especially related to Black Hat 2020.
Sure. Yeah, I'll recap quickly. The biggest thing that we did really was, we announced a couple months ago our 60-day free remote endpoint protection service, which really gives customers, and this was really to help with COVID, and I think we're still working through that as things are getting extended out. Organizations can really come to Qualys, go to qualys.com/remote endpoint, and be able to get a quick way, with a lightweight way, to secure your endpoints by patching them, etc. And we announced last month that we were extending that endpoint service to be able to also detect which machines were compromised in the employees who were working from home, etc. Now, what we are really excited about is on the 29th of July, we're going to have a EDR live event. So if you go to qualys.com/EDR, you will find out more. But we're really excited about announcing the ability to have your EDR capabilities directly through the Qualys agent, through the Qualys platform. And that is something that we are working towards, and something that we're excited to get customers to use those. And then, we as we talked and touched upon a little bit on the XDR side, we actually are actively working on building that XDR capability, and that we are, we're really going to find a way to bring that out towards the end of the year as a capability that customers can do a lot more than the endpoints, right, going in there.
Outstanding. Sumedh, thank you so much for appearing on this edition of Paul's Security Weekly. Again, folks that want to learn more, you can go to securityweekly.com/Qualys and access all the things that we talked about. We've got all kinds of things that we're doing with Qualys, and Qualys has all kinds of things that they're announcing as well. So if you get confused, like, where do I go? securityweekly.com/Qualys. We'll make sure that gets you where you need to go. Sumedh, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure, Paul and team, and we'll see you with Mehul sometime soon.
Absolutely. With that, we'll take a short break, come back with the security news. Stay tuned.